Yes, good evening, sir.
How are you, my man?
The question is, how are you?
Listen, hey, 30 sexy
There we
as
go. 21 plus.
21 plus. This is for the grown and sexy. Mate. I'm good, mate. I'm good.
It is the big man's birthday today, for those of you that probably don't know, aren't aware. So he's joining us on his birthday. Love it.
Hey, listen, you know how it is, that man. The grind don't stop. We gotta get to it, baby.
I like it, mate. I'm looking forward to today, mate. I've had quite a few DMs myself with some questions, some
Yeah,
tricky, some controversial questions.
yeah. I've had
Uh,
mate. I'm probably looking excited, looking forward to this one because, you know, for those of you who don't know, and we will give a bit more insight as to who our guest is later on. But he is a scout of 30 plus years, so has a ton of experience, and will be able to answer a lot of questions that parents ask. I'm sure you get it all the time. That like, what does my son or daughter need to do to be scouted? Like, what extra work should they be doing? Is it right? Should I go to this training? Should I go to that training? My child's in an academy and this is happening, all of those types of questions that we obviously provide as much information as we possibly can on. Thank you for all the birthday wishes, you're much appreciated. But like, again, you know, we talk about it all the time, don't we? Project Footballer is a community that is here to help inform and educate everyone. And like we said, the more people we have here, the more inclined people are of you know, a certain level of expertise are willing to come on and give us their time, thankfully.
I'm definitely looking forward to this. Although I definitely think there's going to be some, controversial answers.
Oh,
And it's not even just
yeah.
the disclaimer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, we're a minute past 7 o'clock, so I will start the show as we normally do. And again, yes, it is my birthday, so all the birthday wishes are welcome and well received. Believe you me, thank you very much. 36 ain't never looked this good before. I'm just, I'm gonna be honest. Not, I haven't got my head done or whatever, but you know, just this, I'm looking good. So. As always, hope everyone is happy, healthy, and well. Thank you for joining us here at Project Footballer, which has been referred to as the #1 show in youth football. Don't ask Dan and myself, that's just what the people say. Um, I'm Darius Charles. You can find me at everybody underscore loves D. He's Dan Edwards. You can find him at Dan Edwards 9. And together, we are the dynamic duo known as Double D's. I'll let you figure that one out. And as always, this is, as I said before, this platform itself is here to educate and inform parents, players, coaches, children, aunties, uncles, and everything in between. And it really is down to the viewer to make sure that they do their own due diligence with any information that they hear, any information that they take on board, because not all the information will be relevant or something you agree with, and it might not make sense to the context of where you're currently at. So really, really understand that you are to take everything we say with a pinch of salt, do your own due diligence, and use what is necessary for you. Dan and I are simply here to facilitate great conversation. So listen, without further ado, let's get into what your weeks look like, Dan, because you just got back home, right?
Yes, I've had a busy week. I've got a busy, I've worked with a couple of players. One's in Milan, one's in Barcelona. So so it was a hectic one. Came back. Theo, my son, who is an under 12 at QPR, played Fulham today, and then I go to Australia tomorrow, Tuesday, in a day or two. For
Yeah,
a soccer school. So it's a busy, it's a busy
yeah.
period, but
Yeah.
it pays the bills.
Can you name the players, or is this a thing of confidentiality? Would you prefer to keep this to yourself? If so, we can
I
mention.
think you'll see if you're on my
Yeah,
socials, you'll know the Barcelona player, the player in Italy. I've said it was in Milan anyway.
yeah, yeah.
It's kind of, it's a new project, it's a trial project. He's trialing me, we're just working things around. But one of the questions I think we had the week before last was about one-on-one.
Yeah.
And what I think is amazing, what Sean's created and his team with the Project Footballer, it
Mm,
works with players, parents, and coaches. at every different chapter
Mm.
in their career. And I think
Yeah.
that is where we have the experience from different chapters, but then Sean will invite guests that have different experiences to us. So as much advice and tips that we can give parents, coaches, and players, it's really important that we get the participation from the Project Football family, so
Mm.
that we can just learn from each other.
Yeah, and that's a great word. I'm glad you used the word family because, as I said, we're trying to cultivate an environment here where everyone, feels included. It's an inclusive environment where everyone belongs, as long as you are respectful of, everyone's opinion, and everyone's opinion is put across in a respectful manner, so we can have healthy discourse. Then please come along. What are some of the questions you've come across recently that people have been asking you?
One of the questions, the most recent question I had was, and this is where, again, we're just going to be very upfront, or we're going to be very upfront and honest. And we're not here to make friends. We're here to educate and help parents, coaches, and players. And one of the questions was, my son always looks at me during his matches. Can you give me some words of advice? Now,
Yeah.
if your son or daughter is constantly looking at you, glancing at you during training or matches, you're too involved. It's as simple as that. Let them play. There's obviously some form of engagement after the game or before the game or training where you're giving them feedback and they feel they need recognition from you. Now, don't get me wrong, there is a time when they've done something really well and they're like, did you see that? However, the more you engage with them, the less they're able to focus on developing, doing what the coaches have asked them to do, working on the areas of improvement. And my biggest thing, and I see it in academy football. But if your son or daughter is watching you whilst they're playing or training, that has to stop. And the only way that can stop is just don't engage with them. It's a tough lesson, it's tough love, but it really will help them, because even if you're just encouraging them every time they do something right, the moment they do something wrong, they're ready for the eyes on their back. And I think that's where my advice, I hate it when I see children look at their parents, a son or a daughter will look at their mum or dad or guardian, whoever's brought them, and they're looking for that recognition. So
No, definitely. Listen, and funny enough, that was a question that I wanted to ask our guest when he comes on, about how parents can help or hinder their child's progress. And as you said, it's really important that parents aren't the cause of confusion or chaos for their kids, right? Ultimately, and I believe I guess we'll agree, and I've always said this, you are chauffeur and cheerleader, and that is it. That is literally it. So it's really, really important, as you said, as a parent, when to engage, when not to engage, or how to engage. Maybe you simply don't know. Maybe you don't know, when to cheer, if you should cheer, what's the right thing to do, what's not the right thing to do. But again, it's, if you're here listening to this conversation tonight, then you're exactly where you need to be, because here is where you will get everything it is you need to hopefully help you become a parent that can help facilitate your child's growth as they're on their footballing journey, wherever that is. So Jay Galiani, who is an avid watcher and listener, and we really appreciate you and love the questions that you put in. He says, situation, not sure what's best environment to have my child in. Average boys team, not doing very well, not very technical, or a high level girls technical team playing against average level.
average level teams.
Understand the question? You'd say it's better for them to play against average level teams.
No, sorry, repeat the question.
So it says, I think it's saying, which one is better? Average boys team that has little technical ability, or high level girls team that plays against the average level?
It's a difficult one because I always say it's great to have competitive training, but it's even more important to have competitive matches because there's a certain type of level and energy that players will put in during training sessions, and it doubles, triples when it's a game. However, if you're spending more minutes training, sort of 2-3 times a week with the very sort of technically gifted team that's going to test your daughter, and then it's just going to be an average standard game. It's a catch-22 because then on the other hand, if the team that is training isn't great, but the games are high intense and there's a high intensity, it's a lot more demanding, then you've got the best of both. You don't have the best of both. You've got a right way either side. So you're not going to lose either way, I feel. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, it's the same. It's much of a muchness, right? You just have to find a way again to find the areas to develop. So when you're playing with the not as good team, okay, how can you show that you're a cut above the rest? What things are you doing as opposed to getting dragged down to the level? How can you raise the standard of that? And then equally, the other side is if you're playing in a high level team. Again, how can you add value? I think that's really what you should be looking for. How can you add value? Don't concern yourself about being the best player. Concern yourself more about being the best player for the team. Because I think those two things go hand in hand. Being the best player, like whether it's technically, tactically, physically, doesn't necessarily make you the best player for the team. I think you always want to focus on marrying up the two so that your development coincides with the team's development, which will then allow you to obviously head to higher heights, would be what I would say. Danny Pabs says, what would you do if your 7-year-old child is not getting enough game time at his grassroots club?
You've got plenty of time, and it's more about the child's environment, in my opinion. So yes, game time is really essential. However, if you move to another team, are they going to be with their friends? There's a psychological and a social kind of aspect to it. If they were in year 6 and under 11 or an under 12, then I could be like, game time's really important. But especially at that pre-academy age, depending on how much your child has developed, if they're shy, if they're able to interact with another group, there is a slight risk if you just pick them up and send them to another team, if they already don't have the relationship with the players, with the coaches, with that whole football environment. What do you think?
No, listen, agreed. I think it's really, you really have to understand your worth, and I say worth, I mean it in the context of obviously that environment that you're in. So maybe they don't see your child as one of the better players, which means that they want to get the best players out there at the expense of your child, which means that you'd be best going elsewhere, like Dan said, to find places where you can improve, or maybe you're on the cusp. And if you improve, if you make slight adjustments, slight improvements, then you can get into the fold. But ultimately, you have to find where you can add as much value as you possibly want to or can do. So it's really important that, again, you have to understand the landscape. That's really what we're talking about. And regardless of whether we're talking under 7s grassroots or first team football in the Premier League, it really is about adding value. And managers 99.9% of the time, depending on where they are, first team, 18s, 16s, foundation phase, whatever, are going to go with their strongest side. Because at grassroots, what you have to remember is this, is very few, if any, coaches are interested in development. That Sunday grassroots team is their Premier League soccer Sunday fixture. And they want to win. And the best players want to go to the teams who are winning consistently. So you're doing that at the expense of development, is essentially what I'm saying. So find out where you fit. And if you don't fit, find somewhere where you do. I want to move on to Nikos GU's question. He says, what do you do where your son trains hard, listens at a PDC level, but at grassroots is restricted to perform due to minimal management, i.e. scores great goals, then is taken off and is restricted game time?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. It again is just about using the different teams that you play for or coaches that he plays for and getting the most out of each individual session. You have to understand, if he's at a development center, then your son or daughter can play at a decent level, and that's where they're hopefully going to be pushed a lot more. They're going to get more development there. The coaches are going to be probably more qualified. When they're with their grassroots team, that's where you need to be. That's the ego boost. That's where they might, if it's too easy for them, then can you set them a target of, you can only score with your weaker foot? And I think that's where I think some parents, if your son or daughter finds their grassroots team too easy, how can you as a parent challenge them? The coach might not be qualified to a certain level and might not have the time to give individual learning points for each player. But as a parent, can you shoot 3 times with your weaker foot? So they're still being challenged even if they find it pretty easy.
Okay.
I'm aware of the time now.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, because Austin Packer, providing his perspective, he said, I think you're wrong. I'm assuming talking to my answer, he said, there aren't as many as there should be, but more than very few are interested in development, especially at under sevens. Well, that's great to know. If there are more than a few that are interested in development, then please let them know. Please, shout them out here, put them in the comments. Because it's difficult with grassroots. There's no funding. It's all self-funded. The parents funded, the coaches put their hand in their pocket. So it is difficult to find coaches that are willing to develop teams and players. So if there are, Austin, then please, let the audience know, because there may be people in the local area near to you who are looking for coaches that can help develop their child. So really appreciate your feedback with that. And I would just like to say, because we're about to bring our guests on, but if there are any more, well, I can see there's loads of questions. Could you please put your questions in the question function? Because towards the end, that'll allow me, Dan, to go through the questions and answer them if we don't have time to while we're currently doing so. So if you just click the question button in the bottom right-hand corner, put your question in there, and we will do our absolute best to make sure we get onto that. But listen, disclaimer again, Project Footballer, referred to as the best show for youth football. Again, not our opinion of those that watch, and we're very grateful and appreciative of that title. This is an opinion-based show based upon the lived experience and qualifications that Dan and I hold and have, but it is not the gospel truth. So again, just before we bring our guest on, it's down to you, the viewer, to do your own due diligence. I cannot stress that point enough. And without further ado, I am about to invite our guest on. Chris, are you with us? Oh, hold on. Chris, how are you?
Hiya. How you doing?
Very well. How are you, sir?
Well, first things first, happy birthday, Darius.
Thank you.
I'm so impressed you're working on your birthday. This is above and beyond,
Well, listen, let me say this, right? Because, I'm an avid watcher of your Instagram, and just like who I presume your wife is, who talks about you being obsessed about football, you can appreciate that football is an obsession, and no matter how hard we try, no matter what the day of the week, we just can't get away from it.
Yeah, absolutely. We wouldn't have it any other way, really, but yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, I would like to say before, obviously, you introduce yourself to the audience, you have an incredible collection of shirts, and I hope to one day own shirts of the same caliber as that you do.
Thank you very much. I can't take any credit for that, though, because my wife picks them all.
Well, she has incredible taste.
Thank you. Yeah.
She has incredible taste.
So she tells me. Yeah.
So Chris, obviously, I follow you. I look at your stuff. I'm sure Dan has seen your stuff as well. But for the audience, for those who know nothing about you, can you kind of speak to, not necessarily, well, just speak to who you are, your lived experience, and why you might be someone that people should probably, listen to occasionally?
Yes, okay. So I'm Chris Robinson. I've been in the game a long time. I've played non-league all over the place, but it's mostly as a coach and manager that I began to find my feet. I managed a lot of teams, Cheltenham Town, amongst others, the FA 11 and what have you. I coached here in the UK and abroad. But really, I got into scouting some years ago. I worked for Portsmouth and other clubs. But then 12 years ago, I joined Chelsea, and I've just finished 2 weeks ago. So just about 11 and a half years with Chelsea in the recruitment team in the academy. And my job title when I finished was head of integration recruitment. So I've sort of been involved in senior roles in the academy there, which has been a great experience. So a long time in the game, a lot of it as a scout. Now I'm in conversation with another couple of clubs about joining them, which is very encouraging. But I've got this book coming out in a year called The Scouting Game, and hence the videos, and the Scouting Game Limited, the business launches in this next week, which does independent scouting assessments of players. And so there's a lot going on, but it's all revolving around scouting. And as you say, the videos on Instagram and TikTok that we've been doing, we've had so many questions from parents asking exactly the sort of questions that you're seeing reflected here, that you guys know and are familiar with. And so we've all got to try and help demystify things a bit, I think, and shine some light on what it is, because we who live it every day know this sort of stuff, exactly how academies work and how trials work and what scouts look for. Yeah. But of course, people out there are not going to be forced to know that. So we have to try and help where we can. No,
that's brilliant. And I think, again, like Sean's done, he likes to bring people to the forefront who can add value. And I'm speaking about you, not myself and Dan, although we do have a vast experience in the game. But so we're here today to discuss a particular topic. I don't know if Sean's briefed you on this. And a parent, I wouldn't say asked a question per se, but put across an opinion and made a statement. So it'd be really interesting to get both of your take on this. So stay with me because it's a long one. So the parent says, my son is an under-9 at a Cat 1 academy. He's settled and beginning to excel. However, one player in particular is very selfish on the ball, especially in matches, but also in every training session. Apart from the occasional shout of, get your head up, the coaches are not discouraging this selfishness. Other players are also selfish, but not to the same extent. As a result of this particular player is coming away from a training session having had probably 200 odd more touches of the football than my son and most other players. Any pass made to this player will 90% of the time result in a mazy dribble until he either loses the ball or scores. He also tends to nick the ball off other players on the same team by encroaching into their space. Again, the coaches are not discouraging this behavior. When this is compounded over 1,000 hours of training, you can do the maths on how far my son can lag behind technically for the sole reason that he's not greedy. My question is this: should I encourage my son to dribble more, even though it's not really his style? Or is it something I need to raise with the coaches? More generally, can you address the problem of greedy kids within academies that deprive other kids of a fair amount of touches on the ball? So, what do we say to greedy kids that dribble every time they get the ball?
It's two. If I can jump in, it's two sides of the same coin, isn't it? On the one hand, we love to see players express themselves, and on the other hand, if it's not your kid that's doing the expressing, maybe you can feel they're greedy, So I sympathise with coaches, just like on one of your previous questions about minutes played. Sharing minutes round. Some parents are happy. The kid gets taken off. He's just scored a goal. They're not happy. But it's two sides of the same coin, and that's the case here, isn't it? You've got to let the players express themselves. We're talking about an under-9 after all, and I think in life, as in football, I advise my kids, I've got a big family, to focus on the things they can control and influence and not stress too much on those that they can't. And I think it's like that in football as a parent. And I've been there, 3 of my boys have been through the academy system. You have to focus on your kid, you know, and you have to trust the process to sort the rest out. I know it's frustrating, and particularly if a kid is hogging the ball or whatever, but I certainly wouldn't advise trying to change your kid's game, what they're good at. You have to, when you're in the process, of course you can question it. By all means, talk to coaches, ask them what the philosophy is, how they're going to, you know, what they think about it. Don't be frightened to communicate ever. But equally, you've got, once you're in the process, you've got to trust it, you know, and trust that people know what they're looking for. They're not always going to be looking for the kid who wants to be on the ball or is on the ball all the time. They're going to look for a mix of players, different types of players. And you've got to just trust that the club that the boy is at know what they're doing. And until they don't, I think you've got to go with the system and not to stress on the other side of it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the most important thing for parents to understand is you have to trust the process. You've signed for this academy, so you believe in their philosophy, you believe in their coaching pathway for their players. I think as a parent, as frustrating as it is, first of all, you have to understand it's only going to get harder each year. And you're stressing with, just worry about your own child, your own son or daughter. The coaches, and there's a lot of turnover in coaches year in, year out. But the club know the program. They know players' abilities, and what your child does at an under 9, under 10, in the grand scheme of things, makes minimal difference to their footballing journey. So I would say allow that player to be greedy and do whatever they want. Trust your son's development and just keep your eyes on your son. And once they are an under 13, it will be a completely different problem that you're now having. So yeah, that trust the process.
Yeah. Some of the comments in here with regards to that, Daniel Jr. 4_ says he should individually try and create chemistry with the dribbler. So I like that. Someone else said, Danny Pab said, my son is a dribbler. I would never advise him to pass. I hope you would advise him to pass when he's meant to pass. But I get your sentiment. Project Ball Parent says still create good runs and get into good positions. It will be noticed. I think that's a really great point. I think, Chris, on your Instagram, you speak about that in terms of the transition in football education when you go from, say, the foundation phase to the youth development phase to the pro phase, and how, you know, these things change and how.
And can you just explain these different phases, age groups, to some of the listeners that aren't aware what the foundation phase is, age group?
So foundation, I'll let you explain, Chris.
Well, I can do it. It's sort of 9s to 11s, 12s to 16s, and then on from there. But the main thing is just looking at year by year. And as the game changes, which I think, Dan, you were alluding to there, when it goes from, say, 7-a-side to 9-a-side and then to 11-a-side, then the requirements on players change. And then different types of players will come to the fore. So let's take, for example, under 9 that we were talking about here. Kid could be maybe a tall and lanky kid, for example. And the relatively small-sided games might not be to their benefit. But the coaches may see, and the scouts who brought them in, may see, well, this is a player who's got something, who can get around the pitch, and in time will come into their own. Then when they get to, say, under 12s and upwards, when they start playing 11-a-side, certainly, and they've got a 9-a-side on the way, some of those kids who got a lot of ball when they're on very small-sided games, very, you know, the technical players, they may struggle to get around the pitch. So everyone has their time. And I think, Dan, you were right. It's about being patient. And it's just about focus on, can your kid improve from one week to the next? Are they working hard? Can they improve? And just focus on that process, the immediate process. And I know this is easy to say when parents are worrying, will they get retained release or will they get kept on? But you can't look too far ahead. You've got to take it one step at a time, one game at a time, and more importantly, get your kid to focus on the process of that training session, because every training session is important. That game, not worry about what might or might not happen in the future, because that's where anxiety can sort of take over. So it's important, just I think, as difficult as it may be, for parents to be patient, to look at it one game at a time, not worry about the future too much if they can, and just get the kid enjoying it and learning from it and working hard at each game and each training session, and then hopefully the system will out and the process will work. And it might not work at that club, let's be honest, you know, and that's okay. And that it might go somewhere else and it might work better, and that's fine. You know, who knows what will happen in the future? Look this week, what can he do in training? If he's going to be training midweek, what can you get he or she, of course, to that training session in the best situation they can, and can they enjoy it and develop, not look too far ahead.
And the coaches can see potential. We all know, coaches and teachers in your classroom, you know personalities, who the joker is, who the quiet one is, who's the bully. And it's the exact same with football coaches. They know the players that are not going to pass, the greedy players, the physical players, the box-to-box players. The coaches can understand, and they're not looking for this week, this month, what has this player done? They're looking into the long term. So even if the coach, they get a different coach year on year, they get player reviews, and the club know the player types, who the passing players are, who are the players that can run. And similar to what Chris was just saying, my son Theo, when he was an under-9 at QPR, technically he was one of the weakest players there. And at under-9, I thought they would, no, at under-10, I thought they would get rid of him just because he technically wasn't good in a small-sided game. However, they knew that in a bigger pitch, he would come into his own. And it was it was touch and go whether or not they'd keep him. But coaches can see potential, and they know players' abilities and what they can bring to the team. But as a parent, if your son's an under-9, just worry about what your son is doing in December 2023 as an under-9. Because there could be an injury, there could be another trialist that comes in, there could be so it always changes.
And it's interesting because Sean and I on the previous week's episode, he obviously stepped in your absence, Dan. Didn't do half a job that you've done, but you know, say that. But we spoke about you know, almost keeping journals like you would yourself. So a lot of the conversation that you guys are having, which is great, is about the long-term development plan, right? And it's like there's the micro and there's macro. So it's like, what have they done today? What have they done this week? What have they done this month? What have they done this year? And being able to create a plan that allows you to zoom out and go, okay, you know, in the grand scheme of things, this week they're below their average amount of touches, just using touches as a metric. But over the course of time, they've been bang on, or they've gone above, or they've exceeded. Then again, you can start to look back at that process and, you know, deep dive into it, reflect on it, think of areas where you could have improved, where you could have done more, things you could have done less of, so on and so forth. So I think as a parent, you're always going to become super engaged, right? Because you are traveling, as we know, here, there, and everywhere. No rain, sleet, or snow. You know, putting your hand in your pocket, whether it's to buy a bacon butty while watching a game and a coffee, getting annoyed because your child has turned up, they ain't bought their shin pads, their shoelaces ain't tied, and you're like, oh my God, I've turned up to the game, my blood pressure's high, and this is what you've decided to do today. I think if you always have something that you can revert back to, it allows you to disengage yourself from the current stress of watching your child continuously dribble or continuously give away the ball or continuously play like they're spectating as opposed to participating. So we spoke about that last week, and it's nice to obviously hear, you know, you guys who weren't here last week kind of say the same things, because it's really important that people who, you know, can see behind the curtain, have worked behind the curtain, provide this type of information so that everyone can see, no matter age, experience, or walk of life, that we're all kind of saying the same things in a relative way. Just want to make a remark to some of the comments here to get your take on it. It says, Queenie_B8 says, I'm a dribbler, but I pass, and my mum will encourage me to be more selfish. She's at a Cat 1 Girls Academy. Well done for being at a Cat 1 Girls Academy. That's lovely. What are we saying to mum?
Is mum a coach? Because if not, she needs to let the kid play, you know. I think Danny said it before in the introduction, didn't you, that you know, the parent has a definite role, obviously, to get them there, and then they've got to let them play. And as a scout, going back to something you both picked up on earlier, if the kid is always looking at the parent during the game, as a scout, I notice that, and I see that, and I worry about it because they look dependent. And are they making their own decisions? So it's a negative as far as the scout is concerned to have that. And if the parent is coaching from the side, then most academies eventually will have a word with them and say, look, leave it to the coaches, because they might not be getting the same message. So I think they've got to, again, it's trusting the process, sticking with the process, and parents should not be coaching from the side. Now, I was the world's worst. I'm holding my hands up. I'm not saying, you know, I wasn't holier than thou at all on this. I was hopeless as a parent on the touchline. Got far too engaged in it. So I've been there and I understand, but it is not the best thing for the kid, you know.
Yeah.
You've got to encourage everybody and be sporting to everybody, but not coach from the sidelines. It's just going to get confusing, and it's not going to help your kid. And sadly, in football, when it comes to retain and release, I've heard it, I'm sure you guys have, coaches will talk about, that parent, and this is the phrase that's used, that parent is really busy.
Yeah.
Now, I personally, as a parent and a grandparent now, think you're entitled to be busy and engaged, but we know often in football that's taken to be a negative, and it doesn't help your kid. It really doesn't, you know. So I think we've got to have a word of caution. You're still going to want to advise, of course, and you have a responsibility. We know that, and you want things to be going right. But once you're in, if you sign up for the season, then just let that season go through. Trust the process. You know?
Trust me, if your son or daughter is at an academy and you're a busy parent, you're a loud parent, you interact with your son or daughter as the game's going on, if your son or daughter is in the bottom group to potentially be released, your busyness will affect their decision. 100%.
Yeah.
Spot on. Yeah.
Let their footballing ability be the reason why they progress, rather than you being the busy parent being the reason why we don't need this ag next season.
No. The question in the spirit of obviously educating and informing parents, whether their child is at an academy and in the bottom set, or they are a parent whose child's on trial, or a child who has recently signed for an academy, how does a parent go about creating the distinction between busy and inquisitive? So what things as coaches, scouts, do we appreciate from parents, as opposed to, obviously we've spoken about like the things that you just make you busy, but what things actually in terms of the difference between helping and hindering your child? Because a lot of parents will say, oh, we're on trial, I don't want to ask too many questions, or, you know, we just got signed and I don't want to be that parent. What is the difference between being busy and being inquisitive? Knowing all that we know, knowing all that you guys know, what types of things can parents do to not necessarily, well, help their child's development?
The clubs have a responsibility, first of all, and the academies. They'll have a structure, you know, and if they don't, they certainly should have, and most certainly do. If a kid is on trial, you'll have that induction. If a kid is signed, you'll have that induction. And that's the time to ask lots of questions. How is this going to work? When am I going to get feedback? What's the feedback in? What should I do? So that conversation is important, and it needs to happen, but it needs to happen at the right time, and that's right at the beginning. Ideally, beginning of each season, or when there's reviews. Then academies will have reviews. You know, they will have, like your parents' evening, going back to the education example, similar things, aren't there, in academies? And they are done in different ways at different academies and at different times. But you need to know that as a parent, and know that's your opportunity, just like when your kid is at school and you've got your parents' evening, that's your opportunity to get in front of them and have that conversation about it. They don't want you to be doing that at the end of every training session to be the one that's always waiting for the coach as they come off the pitch, because that begins to be a negative then. So there is a structure. Find out what that structure is for feedback, and then work that structure. And that's absolutely fine to do it that way. And don't go against the structure by trying to, get too involved in between. That's what I would say.
I totally agree with that. I think it's very simple. You have termly reviews. If you're a trialist, you have a 6-week review, or you have a 4-week review, depending on how long your trial is. Only speak to the coaches during your reviews. The coaches don't get paid enough, and in my opinion, don't care enough to talk to every parent at the end of every training session. They'll be nice, professional, and polite, and we'll have a small conversation, hello, goodbye. However, when I was an academy coach, you don't want to have, everyone's got a problem. If you open that door with your son, someone else is going to want to. And then the moment you got one problem, in 3 weeks' time, you're going to find another problem because this one hasn't been resolved. So as a parent, shut up, drive your child to training, enjoy it, and what will happen will happen. If you have any issues, you have a termly review where you can get your feedback across and get their feedback, in my opinion.
So in a nutshell, what you should be doing as a parent to not become busy but inquisitive is to know when the reviews are, and use those opportunities, not exclusively but specifically, to get as much feedback as you possibly can, because that time is designated for you to find out about where your child currently is and where they have come since last review, and what their projected output should be for them to continue on said journey. And to appreciate that coaches are simply human beings, and you get more bees with sugar than salt, right? So be polite, be nice. Like, we're human beings at the end of the day. The nicer you are to me, the nicer I am to you. The more you rub me up the wrong way, the less likely I am going to want to have a conversation with you. And call it playing the game, call it whatever you want to do. At the end of the day, what's more important? You having the final say, or being able to find out the information that's relevant to your kid developing as much as they can.
And playing the game, playing the game. These coaches, if you're a busy parent that you're going to frustrate, you're going to pee off a bit because you're constantly going up to them, question, you got a problem, question, you got a problem. Your child's next year contract is in their hands. And if you are that busy parent, again, I've said it before, they don't want that ag. So if you're just playing the game as well, it is a game. So wait for the reviews, definitely.
Sorry, John_Ski Hill just said, Mr. Starr, what was the verdict on selfish players? My son is surrounded by kids that don't pass. Should he be playing more for himself?
Play his own game. Play his own game. The coaches know what they're doing and trust the process. But
Dan, what do you say, for example, to parents, how this parent stated in their essay, about having 200 or less touches per session, and obviously the cumulative effect that it would have maybe on their development. What do you say to that?
If your son is at a Cat 1 academy, I'm presuming he's also having a one-on-one coach. I'm presuming that he is of
ILPs
and individual learning programs. And it doesn't really make a difference at an under 9 what is going to happen at an under 11 when they offer or an under 12 when they offer a 2-year program. So if you're stressing now at an under 9, let your child play their own game. The coaches know the greedy ones, they know the bullies, they know the loud ones, they know the players that have a brain. And the most important thing is getting into good habits. As long as your son or daughter is doing good habits week in, week out, when it gets to that certain age group, when the pitch gets bigger and there's certain decisions that need to be made certain times of the year, the coaches will understand, even if they're in the right position but don't get the ball, that's good habits.
Yeah. I absolutely agree, and let's be clear as well. We want players to be selfish at times, don't we? Particularly when they're young, arguably. But even when they become, mature players, when you're in the final third and you've got a chance anywhere near goal, you want the player to be selfish because you want them to take that chance. So there's nothing wrong with that. Hopefully from 9 through to 19, let's say, they'll learn when to be selfish and where to be selfish and make the right decisions. And that's their education. That is a long-term development process. So it's going to be fits and starts and that on the way. Most kids get taken up in pre-academy because they are good running with the ball. You know, they show some technique and they like to play a lot with the ball. And it's not often that you get the kids who really are aware of other players when they're under 9. The better academies, you begin to see that develop, and it develops earlier and earlier, which is incredible, I think. But gradually, they'll be expected to be more aware of other players. But as Dan says, there's plenty of time for that. And you want to keep a balance, as in all things. You know, you want players to be those who like running with the ball, and you want those who that isn't necessarily their strength. You want different sorts of players in your team as you're developing. Coaches inevitably want to win. Because we're all competitive, otherwise we wouldn't be in the game and wouldn't have started this long. So from a scout's point of view, my frustration has often been, and other scouts, is coaches want someone who can improve their team in the short term. Whereas as in recruitment, so scouting on a broader stage with a broader vision, you're looking not what the kid's going to be like next week or at the end of their trial, but what they're going to be like in a year's time or 2 years. I don't think you can look much beyond that, honestly, realistically. So what I'm saying there is that coaches will look fairly short term. They're human too. As Dan is saying, you know, when a kid's on trial and the parent comes up and said, "Oh, how did he do today?" The coach is probably going to say, "Oh, did fine," you know. And then when he gets released at the end of the trial, the parent says, "But the coach said he did fine." So he said, "Yeah, but what did he mean?" You know, so they're not going to want to get into detail on the side of a pitch anyway, in the shorter term. And gradually the bad habits will be lost. And hopefully the good habits, as Dan says, will be retained and improved and developed. And always being selfish on the ball is a bad habit. Knowing where to be selfish is a good habit. So hopefully they'll develop that. But it's not straight line development with kids anyway, is it? So, you know, go with the flow a bit.
I think it's important to reiterate. Dan and I spoke about this earlier because a parent asked, you know, do all football clubs work to the same curriculum? And obviously the answer was a resounding no. Every, you know, academy has their own ideology and philosophy. Some may be similar, but no two are exactly the same. And in particular, at a Cat 1 Academy, because a Cat 1 Academy is what's in question, there will be heads of coaching for the youth development and foundation phase. So again, yes, the coach wants to win right here, right now, but his line manager will have an ethos, a philosophy that ties in, obviously, to the club's footballing philosophy. So again, if this player is, you know, a dribbler that doesn't pass the ball, there is a reason that coaches aren't telling him different. Whatever the reason is, I don't know. But there is a reason why the coach isn't discouraging them to do so. Maybe it is in alignment with their coaching philosophy. Maybe they want players who are brilliant dribblers. But, you know, as Chris mentioned before, as they grow, as the pitch dimensions get bigger, they're not going to be able to dribble every time they get the ball. So what you will find is maybe the training sessions, maybe the tactical style of play will start to change, and that will then incur changes in the player's playing style. And if they aren't able to match that playing style, the kid that you was worried about hogging the ball and taking 200 more touches than your child will be the same kid that gets released at 14s or 16s because he doesn't know when to release the ball. And I mean, we see it all the time and time again. I remember playing with a lad who was physically a lot stronger than all of us, from 11s all the way up to 18s. When everyone, you know, reached puberty, got strong, could run about, his ability to dribble and take all those touches was null and void. And in actual fact, what he needed to do was get his head up, make a pass, and then make another angle. So again, that just kind of ties back into that whole conversation of long-term development. And I don't want to steal Chris's thunder, but on his page, someone asked a question about, I can't remember what the question was, but you went on to speak about how it's not about the, we're so caught up in this current day and age of my kid needs to take 1,000 touches, 2,000 touches, 3,000 touches. And I think what we have to appreciate is it's not about the amount of touches you take, it's about the quality of your touches.
Yeah, I was taught a while ago by a very experienced scout that there's only 2 touches that matter. That's the first touch and the last touch. And it's obviously, like a lot of these things, it's an oversimplification, but it made me think and change the way that I looked at players. And that first touch is so important. Mm-hmm. And then what do they do with it with that last touch? So from a scouting point of view, I've learned over the years to actually focus on just those 2 touches. Mm-hmm. Now, if all the stuff in between that, you know, they're beating half a dozen opponents, well, then that's great. Yeah. But the first and the last touch, and if going back to the original question, if the under-9 lad at Cat 1 Academy not getting so much of the ball, what's his first and his last touch doing? Because I think that the good scouts, the good coaches will focus on that as those 2 things as well. And you can always work to improve those 2 things, control and decision making, with the skill to execute it. And they're the things that really matter to me in a game. And I've learned as a scout to really focus on that when I'm looking at a player each time, first and last touch, just those 2.
I love that, because it really does, I think, almost give parents hope that the best scouts, the best recruits will find the best players. So yeah, if your kid's an under-9 and they're not taking as many touches as another kid might be, it might be a case of, when you have your moment, what are you like in your moment? You might only have 5 moments as opposed to this kid's 15, but this kid might be terrible for 10 out of the 15, and you might have 5 in your class. And a scout, presumably, or recruitment will presumably go away and go, every time they were on the ball, they were effective. And I think that's kind of what people, parents, scouts, coaches need to kind of like start educating themselves to look for, because I think then now you'll be able to identify better players sooner.
And I think also, sorry, Dan, jumping in again, that it's a point that I think was briefly mentioned before. If the kid who's selfish and is playing, you know, dribbling every time he gets the ball, what is our boy doing meanwhile? What's his position like? Is he making those runs, but he doesn't get the pass? Well, that's okay. Does he keep making those runs? So is he keep doing the right thing? Is he ready to support the play? Is he ready to go ahead of it and find space? Not so much at under-9, but as they get older, you look for those things. So there's loads still for the scout or coach who's assessing players to be looking at, other than when they've got a ball. When I do a report on a player that's just an individual player report, I look at that player and not the ball. And if the ball is at one end and my player's at the other end, I'm watching my player all the time. Does he change position when possession changes? You know, where the ball goes, does he affect? Does he talk to people? Is he ready? And so I think parents, again, need to understand, and as you say, it's a part of their education too, that when we're assessing players, we're looking not just at what they do on the ball. Have they got some of those good habits that Dan mentioned? Are they showing those in terms of their movement off of the ball? That's important too.
Yeah.
Chris, and where can everyone find you, contact you, get more information?
Thank you. The Scouting Game is on Instagram and TikTok and the YouTube channel, The Scouting Game. And we put all our videos on there. The Scouting Game.co.uk website launches this week. So you'll see a consistent use of the phrase, The Scouting Game. And
Yeah.
that is the name of the book that's out next year as well. So keep
Yeah.
looking for the scouting game wherever you are, and you'll find me somewhere nearby.
We
Brilliant.
definitely need you back on again.
100%.
We've
Pleasure.
got a load of quick fire questions, so we're gonna love you and leave you. Thank you very much.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
But hold on, before you do go, because we will get into quick. I just want to give you a couple quick fire questions, and most of these questions were taken from your own Instagram. So again, guys and girls, you're going to hear a summarized version of some of the questions that he's already answered on his Instagram, which is the_scouting_game.
Yep.
Boom. If you're not already following Chris, make sure you go and do so. If not right now, after this show. So, quick one, because it's one of the biggest questions we get. Do you find academies prioritize physical attributes over technical attributes?
Yeah, some do, to be honest. There are some academies, and I think you mentioned this, Darius, before, who they'll have their philosophy and they'll have their game plan as their development, and they might prefer more physical players, individual, foundation lead coaches or even heads of coaching of academies may prefer certain types of players. So yeah, there will be. You do see trends. Also, there's trends of what their catchment area is. What types of players are there in their area, because it's geographically limited, as we know. So there might be a definite characteristic, a type of player that does well at one academy than another. Yeah. But don't be discouraged by that, if you're the other sort, because all of the academies will at some time want a balance of players, different types of players.
Brilliant. So, born in August, chance or forget about it?
It's a good one. It's tough. We know that statistically, that massive proportion of kids of Premier League players are still born in the first quarter of the year in which their football is organised, which for us is an academic year, and in Europe, the rest of Europe is obviously on a calendar year, national year basis. And
so we're talking, when you say Q1, for those that don't know, what months are we talking?
September, October, November. Those are the months at which there are more professional players, or if they're growing up in a country that organises a calendar year, January, February, March, because they tend to be more mature when they're very young. They tend to get picked up because they're more mature, and then they get the better coaching, and then they get the better development opportunities. So yes, it can be difficult. However, again, don't be discouraged if your kid is a July or August birth, because clubs are very aware of it, academies are very aware of it, and it is an attraction when you find out, because you don't know when you're just watching a player on the park, you don't know when their birthday is, but when you find out, well, actually, they were July. Certainly in my experience, the scouts who worked in my teams have said, oh, that's a good thing, that's interesting. So it can be an attraction. And then there's further research to say that those from the younger ages to the younger ones, the June, July, August, in our terms, or even say May, June, July, August, when they progress, if they do get through the system, at the very top levels, they actually do better. Bizarre.
And Arthur Allen _10 says Thierry Henry is August born, so I mean, hey.
Yeah, so that was in France, so he's in the middle towards the middle of the year. It's always going to be it's always going to be exceptions. Absolutely.
Always
the statistics don't lie, No,
they don't. They're simply just a measure of historical data.
Yeah.
Right?
So it's something to be aware of, but don't be discouraged by it.
Right. So last question before we love you and leave you, Chris. It's just a game. Let them play. let them play, right? Let them play.
Don't let them play for me.
Just let them. Right, they're in the camp. Just let them play.
Right. Yeah, absolutely right. And if kids want to enjoy the game and go and play with their friends and have fun playing football, that's fantastic. And good luck to them. It's healthy. They're out there in all weathers. That's terrific. I'm just not interested in them.
I like that attitude.
I love it. Is that because? Well, I don't want to. I want. You know what? We'll leave it there because I really do want people to go and connect and engage with your Instagram. I want them to go and read the book when it's out. I want them to subscribe to the YouTube channel, because we would be doing you and our in our family here a disservice by simply allowing them to believe that these answers were, you know, were said in their entirety. There is so much more nuance to the questions that I've just fired at Chris and the answer itself. So please, I cannot stress enough, you know, I've recently started watching your stuff and I've learned so much, even here
Well,
talking,
thank you.
you know, the way in which I coach, but being able to simplify some of the messages I might give now, like the only thing that matters is the first and the last touch. Like even being able to give those little gems to players that I come across now, whether I'm coaching them or I'm mentoring them, or it's my son who I'm watching from the sideline. It's really good to know that, you know, you've been able to instill some of that on me, because we're always learning. So really appreciate your time today, Chris. Can't thank you enough.
Cheers, mate. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, Darius, I'm not sure what you're like for time-wise. I'm good.
Yeah.
We apologise that we've not answered many of the questions. How long have you got?
Right, let's do a quick 10 minutes. Let's do a 10.
Let's go. First one. People
Right.
say gym kills footballers. So what can I work on in the off season to get stronger?
Well, you're gonna have to be more specific, because gym does not. Gym is where athletes are made. Are you now? If you're doing too much bench press because you're doing aesthetic gym, that's not going to help your football. Your gym has to be tailored to your footballing requirements or your footballing needs. So, am I doing mobility stuff? Am I working on my range of motion? Am I working on opening up my muscles so that I can strengthen them at end range, so that I can, you know, exert more force when I'm sprinting? I can jump higher. Am I able to twist and turn my body but have a core that's strong, so I can keep control of my body while holding off a player? You absolutely need gym. It's, as we said before, the four corners of football: tech, physical, psychological, social. You have to be in the gym, and it will be relevant to not only your position but your age.
And it's about the maintenance work in the gym.
Yeah.
It's not about explosive overdoing stuff, because that's where you're going to have injuries. Next one, how do we deal with mums using their female powers to get their child into academies? Listen, they played a game. They played a game. It's as simple as that.
That's and listen,
straightforward.
That is an absurd accusation that I'm not willing to touch because I don't have enough context. But I will say this. Football is a microcosm of life. That's all I'm going to say. Football is a microcosm of life. We all have privileges. We all have disadvantages. Those who are successful find a way to use their advantages to their advantage, as well as being able to hide or not have to deal with their disadvantages. So that is something that you are going to have to manage. And I'm not talking about that specific scenario. I'm simply talking about life.
Rob White had a few questions. Rob,
right.
I need to look through the chat a bit more, but no, we did. Yeah, next week we will tailor this so that we're answering a lot more questions. Have you got any questions there, Darius?
Oh God, have I? And I would say to that is that Chris was such an amazing guest. We had to have him on because he, coming from, the background of recruitment and scouting, has a vast wealth of knowledge that I think I know parents need to hear. So yeah, today we didn't get through as many questions as we'd like to. I would like to think, though, we've provided a ton of information and answered questions that may have not come up or have come up previously. But as far as questions go, bloody hell. Right, so how do you manage with wishes to have a time with friends and training? So I guess the question is, how do you balance your time training and your time with your friends?
It depends on, 1, what kind of parent you are, 2, what kind of child you have, 3, what level your son or daughter is at, and 4, their age. It really does depend. You want them to be a child, depending on their age, depending on what club they're at, they need to train. They need the extra training. One of the other questions was, why did I say the Cat 1 player has extra training? Do Cat 1 clubs provide extra training? No, that is just me, just a generic answer. Kind of, I feel a lot of academy players have a one-on-one coach. Academies will not pay for that. A lot of academies are against players having one-on-one coaches because they feel they have enough training as it is. But if you want to develop and be the best, you need to go above and beyond. Yeah, hopefully
Yeah.
it's answering too.
Dan, Cheryl Drake Kev asked a question. Do coaches prefer the in-group of parents who always stand together on the sidelines, or the parents who stand away from the in-group and keep themselves to themselves?
Coaches aren't bothered. The coaches just don't want to get hassled. And they can hear, and I was an academy coach. You can hear everything that is going on. If the games are being filmed, you can hear everything that is going on. You can see the players that are looking at their parents. You can see the parents that are interacting with their players that are very flamboyant, that are just out there. You can just see it as a coach. So even if you're with a group, that's fine. The only problem is if you're with a group of parents and someone in that group makes noise, you don't know who it is. So it's, so as a coach, and the coaches, academy coaches, they would have worked their 9 to 5. They've then gone to the academy session in the evening, coached 2 hours. They've still got paperwork that a lot of parents don't know that academy coaches have to complete afterwards. And a coach will never tell you anything negative after training. That is a fact. So do not be surprised if you're getting released or a bad review because you're going to the coach every week. Oh, how did my son do? He is never going to say he didn't do well, because that just opens up the channel to have a conversation. And coaches don't want conversations.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And Dan, you make such a great point. And it came up earlier where Chris, like parents will say, or maybe yourself as like parents say like, oh, but the coach said it was fine. It was fine. Yeah, it was fine because the coach just wanted to, it's the middle of November, it's freezing cold, and he just wants to get home. So again, you have, there's a level of self-awareness that comes to when you're asking the question. You know, I'm not saying don't ask it. I'm saying be conscious of when you're asking it, because when you're asking it might determine how truthful the answer it is you get. Underscore heritage underscore says, it feels like if you're not signed by 7, 8, or 9 to an academy, you might as well not bother, especially with the rise of social media highlights. Can you shed light on this myth?
There is not an age limit, and certain players have proved it. Don't get me wrong. The older you get, the more difficult it is going to be. However, from under 12, from under 13 is when they offer 2-year contracts. So 13s and 14s is 2 years, 15s and 16s is 2 years, scholars is 2 years. So that's when it gets a lot more difficult because they've already offered 2 years. So they know the certain type of players they want. But there isn't an issue with age. Somebody's put, will this live be available on YouTube like the others? Yes, it will be. And also on the page.
Let me see. This says, God, sorry, there's so many questions.
I've got one. My son had a bad game. Any advice? First of all, your son having a bad game. They're never going to have a great game. No player is going to have an amazing game. Theo today, they played Fulham, and it was their first 11-a-side game. And how I worded it with Theo, he was playing against a big, solid centre forward. And I said to Theo, what didn't you like about this player? He was big, he was physical. And I said, and did it put you off your game? He said, yes. My question to him was, how can you put him off your game? He then gave me the answer. And then it's changed the topic from him saying he didn't have a good game to then you're putting the ball in their court. So, it's not about your son. They have to realise Messi misses penalties, Haaland misses opportunities. Every player is going to make mistakes. But how can you word it so that your child understands they're developing? They're not always going to have a great game.
Yeah. Danny Pab says, what do you do if your child is the best player in the team, even recognised by all parents, but for some reason the coach doesn't give them enough game time and favours other kids whose parents he is he's related to?
Yeah, this is football. Like, you have to suck it up and just get on with it. Like, there's going to be so many more issues in football, and parents, my son's at an under 12, and there's parents that are fuming, aren't happy week in, week out. It's only going to get more and more difficult. There's going to be contracts. There's going to be 2-year deals. There's going to be scholarships. So, don't worry about that. Just worry about your son's development rather than looking at all the other little things that are going to, push your buttons. Because as parents, we've got enough on our plate to worry about than Johnny not getting enough minutes.
Yeah. And what I love, Dan, I've noticed in the chat while we're talking, that parents or players or coaches or kids, they're actually atting each other and conversing with each other. And I know all the time, obviously I mentioned my Instagram handle and Dan's and Chris's, but take each other's Instagrams. have conversations amongst yourself. That we are a family, right? And we're here to create a healthy discourse to help everyone improve and develop and learn. And you don't have to wait every Sunday to hear what Dan and I have to say. You can have these conversations throughout the week. And in doing so, instead of maybe just asking us questions, maybe like whoever it was earlier that said, made a comment about a comment I made about there being few grassroots coaches who are interested in development, actually having an opinion, having a point and saying, well, no, I know of many coaches who are interested in kids development. Well, let the rest of this community know, because again, like I always say, as our disclaimer at the beginning and in the middle and at the end of the show, it is down to do your due diligence. Dan and I have a vast wealth of experience. Whether we've lived it ourselves or vicariously lived it through others that we know or players that we've coached, mentored, been around, friends of a friend. We have so much experience, but we don't have all the experience. We don't have all the knowledge. We don't have all the know-how. And in actual fact, a lot of the things we say might have no relevance or validity to the current context that you are in or ever going to be in. So communicate with each other, use everyone in here, not just myself, Dan, Project Footballer, Sean, Chris, Marcelo, us, and everyone else connected to Project Footballer. Use each other. That is what, will help this platform grow, this show become bigger, allow us to reach more people in youth football. We're regarded the #1 show in youth football in the UK. Let's become the #1 show in Europe and then the world. But we're only going to be able to do it with your help, with your engagement, and with your understanding and learning. So yeah, man, let's continue to grow together. Any last words from you, Dan?
No, I feel there are a lot of, and myself and Darius, we're learning week in, week out with this process as well, doing the lives, and we're trying to help educate players, coaches, and parents. We're learning as well, like we just learned from Chris. Somebody has put about, will we answer the questions that we've missed? I'm going to speak to Sean, who is the boss, the gaffer, the CEO, the brains, the beauty of Project Football. I will speak to him about running another idea where if you can send your questions, message Project Footballer, send all your questions, and I will speak to him about how we can answer them sort of throughout the week, just a quick fire answers rather than a live, because it's really important that we try and engage with as many of you as possible. And one last thing I would say is anything that we say, you may only take 1% of a topic. You need to run with that 1% because it's 1% more than what you had initially in the first place. And that is with conversations that you have with other parents, players, and coaches. You might disagree with 99% of the things they say, but that 1%, yeah, how can that develop you as a parent, you as a coach, you as a player, and just, yeah, make you overall a better person? Yeah. But yeah, loved it today.
Brilliant, brilliant. Listen.
Happy birthday, Darius. Happy birthday, Darius.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Listen, as always, it's an absolute pleasure going through these questions and racking both our brains, Dan. We are the dynamic duo known as Double Ds. Please do not hesitate to DM myself, Dan, Sean, and also what I need you to go and do is I need you to go and spam the Project Footballer Instagram about this live show. If you want us to do this live show, you've got to let the boss know, okay? Every day this week, you need to put live show in 5 times. Every day. So, comments. Live show. Every day, okay? That's what we need from you so we can get this live show together and not just have the conversations here virtually, but together with you guys, with guests, with speakers. It'll be amazing. So listen, as always, thank you for spending your evenings with us. It's greatly appreciated, and it's very humbling. It's very, very humbling for us. So Dan, bro,
thank you for spending your birthday evening with us, my friends.
Listen, you know what it is. We got to give back. That's what we do, right?
There we go.
That's what we do. But listen, love, blessings as always. I hope everyone stays happy, healthy, and well during the week. Bless.
See you later.